Before 1954, a staggering 700,000 immigrants passed through these doors, all processed in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty at Ellis Island Hospital. Doctors here were tasked with identifying defects in a mere seconds, handling up to 5,000 people daily. A buttonhole stare was enough to flag trachoma, a devastating eye disease that guaranteed rejection from America. Chalk marks on coats served as quick labels. H for heart, L for lameness, part of an initial 19 symbols that determined fates with terrifying speed. While modern medical screening takes hours, Ellis Island doctors had about 6 seconds. That's less time than it takes to blink. Ultimately, over 120,000 immigrants faced rejection by 1954, a devastating, life-altering judgment. It's frankly absurd that roughly 2% of all immigrants were excluded, a small number nonetheless causing immense personal tragedy, with families separated and dreams shattered based on fleeting observations. Doctors diagnosed over 200,000 cases of contagious diseases, including tuberculosis and trachoma, before immigrants even touched mainland soil. The buttonhook inspection tool was used to check eyelids for trachoma, a leading cause of blindness, impacting thousands of hopeful arrivals. Between 1892 and 1954, only about 2% of immigrants were denied entry. Over 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island in its operational history, each one fearing the doctor's quick judgment. Measles outbreaks were common, prompting hundreds of immediate hospitalizations and isolating entire families. Yet despite thorough checks, many health conditions still slipped through. Around 100 medical staff worked tirelessly, managing this vulnerable population. These marked individuals faced secondary examinations, sometimes lasting for days. Imagine being quarantined away from your newborn. The sheer scale of this initial medical gauntlet is hard to grasp. Ellis Island wasn't just a port of entry. It was a uniquely isolated medical campus, a distinct habitat between worlds. By 1906, landfill expanded the island to over 27 acres, primarily to house its growing medical facilities. This isolation acted as a crucial epidemiological barrier, preventing diseases from incoming ships reaching densely populated New York City. The hospital complex itself was vast, over 20 buildings, featuring specialized wards for infectious diseases and ensuring strict patient segregation. Patients endured weeks or months of isolation, completely separated from family, a harsh reality that deeply disrupted their hopes of starting anew. The mere thought of being sent to the hospital instilled profound fear among new arrivals, even for minor ailments. Despite this dread, Ellis Island doctors pioneered vital screening techniques, managing large-scale public health crises across decades of operation. Daily hospital census could surge past 250 patients during peak immigration, showcasing an incredible feat of medical logistics under immense pressure. This medical gateway operated from 1892 until 1954, remaining a powerful symbol of America's complex relationship with immigration and public health. The General Hospital alone housed 750 beds, a sprawling biocontainment unit built for overflow from a dozen steamships. This entire medical fortress sat just 1 mile from Manhattan. A deliberate gap of water served as nature's most effective quarantine. The campus included a massive contagious disease ward, a psychiatric hospital, and even an autopsy theater for study. Imagine being told you're free, only to be redirected to a floating hospital. The psychological whiplash alone was a pre-existing condition. Originally a tiny 3-acre island, it grew to 27.5 acres from landfill, much of this coming from New York's subway construction. 2%. That's all. Yet these few arriving immigrants were detained, many with highly contagious diseases. While many feared visible ailments, the greatest threat Ellis Island faced were the invisible enemies. Diseases lurking unseen among the hopeful passengers, demanding rigorous defense. The most feared diagnosis was trachoma, a contagious eye infection that accounted for over 50% of all medical detentions. Doctors used a buttonhook to flip eyelids inside out, a brutal but effective 2-second search for telltale scarring. They also hunted for favus, a nasty fungal scalp infection that caused permanent hair loss and carried immense social stigma. Just a handful of doctors performed this line inspection. Each examined up to 400 immigrants per hour during peak times. Inspectors used different chalk codes to mark clothing, flagging individuals for everything from lameness L to pregnancy PG. A medical detention could last for weeks. The hospital billed steamship companies $2 per day for care. Child mortality was a grim reality. Diseases like measles caused fatality rates in the contagious disease ward as high as 40%. Beyond physical signs, doctors screened for feeble-mindedness, a vague diagnosis that could mean deportation for over 20 different perceived conditions. Tests involved simple puzzles or identifying pictures. Tasks often favored those with specific cultural knowledge over actual cognitive ability. Ultimately, only about 2% of all arrivals were denied entry. But that still meant over 250,000 lives were turned around. The steamship companies bore the financial burden, forced to transport any rejected immigrant back to their port of origin for free. Over the hospital's 6 decades of operation, more than 3,100 people died within its walls, never reaching their new world. By 1914, Ellis Island Hospital wasn't just a building, it was a sprawling medical city with 22 separate structures. The largest U.S. public health service hospital in the country. It housed distinct wards for men, women, and children, complete with specialized facilities for contagious diseases, all designed for the strictest isolation. Inside, you'd find 2 operating theaters, a pathology lab, and even its own morgue. This place had a massive 750-bed capacity, dwarfing many city hospitals which typically held around 200. Over its years of operation, this medical fortress delivered over 10 million patient days of care, with doctors often managing 2,000 daily admissions. The General Hospital alone accounted for 300 beds, while the separate contagious disease hospital on Island 3 could isolate another 450 patients in its highly specialized wards for obstetrics, tuberculosis, mental health, and surgery. The infamous psychopathic ward was where immigrants were held for observation, sometimes for weeks. Their supposed illness, often stemming from mere cultural misunderstanding or sheer exhaustion. The complex even had a morgue ready for 24 bodies, and a laundry facility capable of steam sterilizing 3,000 pieces of linen daily. You can't fight a plague with dirty sheets. Building this fortress against microscopic invaders involved over 2 million bricks, weighing a total of 10 million pounds. A network of 200-foot-long covered corridors connected the wards, ingeniously engineered to contain outbreaks. It's a walk of nearly a quarter mile between departments. Imagine that. The main kitchen was an industrial operation for human repair, designed to prepare 500 meals 3 times a day. And powering it all, a dedicated plant generated all the electricity and steam for this self-sufficient medical metropolis. "700,000 immigrants passed through Ellis Island before its closure in 1954. But not all were welcomed. Beyond basic observation, Ellis Island physicians honed remarkable diagnostic skills, using specialized instruments to uncover hidden ailments. The bacterial infection trachoma, if found, meant immediate deportation, accounting for over 50% of all medical removals. Doctors then used stethoscopes to listen for tuberculosis, a painstaking process that could take up to 5 minutes per person. By the 1920s, the hospital had acquired X-ray machines, a revolutionary technology that allowed doctors to see the ghostly shadows of TB within the lungs. An on-site bacteriology lab analyzed samples, confirming diseases like diphtheria with near 99% accuracy, turning suspicions into undeniable facts. To detect favus, a grotesque scalp fungus, doctors raked a comb through patients' hair. Finding just one infected strand meant immediate deportation, a brutal efficiency. The buttonhook became their primary tool for examining eyes for trachoma, a condition that guaranteed exile. Failing this 1-second exam landed 10% of detainees in extended observation, facing potential rejection. Beyond eyes, stethoscopes probed chests for tuberculosis, listening for the telltale rails of lungs scarred by disease bacteria. The hospital installed an advanced X-ray plant in 1923, letting doctors peer directly into the skeleton for abnormalities. The bacteriology lab processed over 10,000 specimens annually at its peak, a staggering volume of microscopic detective work. Doctors also looked for defective mentality, using puzzles, math problems, and shape-sorting tests to assess cognitive function. These tools transformed human observation into a diagnostic machine, terrifyingly efficient for the era. In just its first decade, Ellis Island processed 700,000 immigrants, a wave of humanity demanding an almost unimaginable level of medical scrutiny. At the heart of it all was the human brain, the primary diagnostic engine for the island's doctors, constantly locked in complex problem-solving. Their cognitive engines worked overtime, fed by data from over 80 nationalities, each bringing unique genetic predispositions and disease histories. Trying to diagnose without a shared language was a daily reality, with only 30 interpreters for thousands of arrivals, forcing them to decipher symptoms across vast cultural and linguistic divides. They had a mere 6 seconds to spot latent insanity. Doctors hunted for rare signs like the crusty scalp lesions of Favus, a fungal infection most American physicians had never encountered. Fewer than 50 doctors at any given time bore the responsibility for this massive public health screening of millions. Their brains weren't just diagnosing, they were acting as judge and jury. One chalk mark could erase a family's future. Nearly 20% of those marked for deportation appealed, forcing doctors to articulate their split-second diagnoses to a board. After 1913, early IQ tests added another layer, with doctors attempting to quantify intelligence itself. It was biological detective work, pattern recognition on a scale modern medicine, with all its machines, rarely attempts anymore. A single doctor might examine 500 to 1,000 people in a single shift. That's one person every 30 seconds. This intense cognitive training forged some of the most skilled diagnosticians on Earth, a human super skill now mostly extinct. Physicians often faced over 60 languages and dialects daily, trying to diagnose complex symptoms. Picture this: a single 1.25-mile covered corridor, linking 22 buildings into the hospital's very circulatory system, shielding everyone inside from the weather. It was like a mile-long, climate-controlled highway, exclusively for the sick. This was billed as the world's most advanced hospital, a massive logistical marvel powered by steam and managed entirely by paper records. The whole operation was designed to handle 1,500 meals a day, with a laundry that processed 3,000 linen items daily. Everything about it was built for movement. A dedicated ferry named the Ellis shuttled sick individuals 400 yards at a time between the main hall and the more isolated hospital sections. This wasn't some sterile, abstract bureaucracy at play. It was a profoundly human, very physical operation. In the contagious disease wards, they could house up to 125 children with measles at once, their small iron cribs arranged in long, solemn rows. This intricate system yielded remarkable success. Over 90% of the 3,500 patients admitted annually to contagious disease wards were successfully treated. During peak immigration years, that meant a daily patient flow of 100 to 200 individuals. It was, quite intentionally, a system focused on selection and recovery. Commissioner William Williams himself put it starkly: "We must be as cold as a steel knife. It is not a sentimental job, but one of duty." The scale just kept growing. By 1911, the hospital was diagnosing patients from over 80 countries, a huge leap from just 30 in 1902. Think of the sheer volume of movement needed daily. A dedicated nursing staff of over 300 managed this constant flow, achieving an astonishing ratio of roughly 1 nurse for every 3 patients. The average hospital stay here lasted about 3 weeks. Over 700,000 souls passed through these